Hey kids, welcome to session on the circulatory system. Today, I would like to explain the blood vascular system and its components. Basically, from few classes onwards, we had been learning the circulatory system right from the external morphology of heart to the internal morphology of the heart. In this moment, let me explain the blood vascular system that depicts the structural framework of blood vessels in our body. Blood vessels are playing a key role in all kind of transportation. So the transportation of gases like oxygen, then transportation of nutrients required for cells, all these components are transported through this blood vascular system. So the blood vascular system, which includes arterial system and the venous system. If you see the arterial system, before going to learn the arterial system, let us learn what is an artery. What do you mean by an artery? An artery is a blood vessel which carries blood away from the heart. Any kind of blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart, it is said to be as an artery. By the way, what do you mean by a vein? A vein is a blood vessel which receives the blood towards the heart. Such kind of blood vessels are veins. So, aorta, that is our largest blood vessel, as you know very well. The aorta is the largest and most fascinating blood vessel that forms a network of arterial system in our body. So, let us see the artery. Here, if you carefully look at the artery, it has three layers. An outer layer, tunica externa, middle layer, tunica media, inner layer, tunica interna. So, tunica externa, which is a thick outer layer made up of collagen fibers. Collagen fibers are most delicate and very prosperous. And tunica interna or media, thicker inner layer, or it contains elastin fibers, whereas innermost layer called tunica interna that contains endothelium, which gives the support to the inner surface of blood vessel. So there is a narrow central lumen is present in the blood vessel of an artery. That narrow central lumen is a space where the blood flows from particular place to another particular place. Right. A branch of science that deals with the blood vessels. There is a separate branch of science which could deals with study and working on mechanism of blood vessels, namely angiology. So, arteries, if you carefully see the arteries, how these arteries has special characters. Arteries has three layers as we have seen earlierly: tunica externa, media, tunica interna, right? If you carefully look at some important major arteries in our body, you can see in the figure. If you see the aorta, which is originating from the heart, now you can see the aorta, which is originating from the heart. Each aorta forms major branches of arteries. Arteries maybe you can see in the figure, and already you have known what is an artery. If you see the various arteries like renal artery which supplies the blood to kidneys, whereas you can see the pulmonary artery which carries the blood towards the lungs for purification, and you can see the right subclavian artery, left subclavian artery in the figure, right. If you see the venous system generally looks like this. So, what are the various veins which are originating from the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava? From the superior vena cava, you can see the brachiocephalic veins and the subclavian veins, and you can see the precaval veins, nothing but superior vena cava, postcaval veins are nothing but inferior vena cava. So, what I am trying to say, a venous system is formed by the typical precaval, postcaval veins of the heart in the body. Each vein has been dividing into many smaller branches like femoral vein, which receives or collects blood from the femur bone. Largest bone in our body is femur bone that surrounds the muscles. From these muscles, blood is collected by deoxygenated blood is collected by femoral vein. Large subcutaneous vein you can see, which collects the blood from subcutaneous layer of the skin, and a papillary vein which collects the blood from the kneecap. So like this, there are major veins. Whereas if you see the pulmonary vein is quite different from pulmonary artery. Pulmonary vein, which receives oxygenated blood from the lungs, which means pulmonary vein collects the deoxygenated blood from the lungs and transfers this blood into the auricles. Which auricle receives the oxygenated blood in the heart? Left auricle receives oxygenated blood. Right. If you see the structure of a vein, as usually like an artery, the vein also has 3 layers around itself. Then outer layer, which is tunica externa, media, and tunica interna, vice versa. The 3 layers of the vein, and there is a large space in the middle of the vein which is present called the lumen space. Right. Here if you see carefully, angiology, a major branch of science that deals with the study of blood vessels, as we have discussed. There are 3 kinds of blood vessels are seen: arteries, veins, and capillaries. And each of these plays a very specific role in the circulation process. And arteries carries oxygenated blood, whereas veins receives the blood towards the heart. Arteries always carries oxygenated blood, and the type of blood may vary. If suppose take the pulmonary artery, which carries deoxygenated blood towards the lungs for purification, whereas if you see the aorta, renal artery carries oxygenated blood towards the kidneys. That is a differentiation between pulmonary artery and other kind of arteries. Except the pulmonary artery, remaining all arteries carries oxygenated blood. That is a point which you have to remember. And most probably largest blood vessel in our body or on the surface of heart is aorta. After the aorta, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava, which are called as caval veins, considered as second largest blood vessels in our body. And you know very well, the superior vena cava collects deoxygenated blood from upper parts. Inferior vena cava collects deoxygenated blood from the lower surface of the body. Whereas pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood, as we know very well. And let us learn one more blood vessel, that is capillaries. Students, what do you mean by a capillary? How can you define a capillary? A capillary is a blood vessel which is a tiny blood vessel. We can call it as a tiny, smaller, microscopic blood vessel. These capillaries are discovered by scientists, namely Marcello Marfisi, for the first time. Capillaries are hair-like structures that are visible under microscope, normal microscope like compound microscope and electronic microscope. X-ray beam microscope can reveal the secret and study of capillaries. Capillaries directly opens into the cells and supplies the blood and collects the blood. And capillaries are the blood vessels which carries the blood to the tissues or to the cells. And arteries are always present in the deeper layers of the muscles, whereas veins are present on superficial layers of the muscles. That is one more point which you have to remember. Clear, students? I hope so everybody enjoyed the session, the blood vascular system and blood vessels. We will meet in the next session once again. Thank you. Have a nice day.